Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. This episode is brought to you by the Wellness Paradigm, a holistic health coaching company shifting the way that women understand and heal their bodies. Through bioenergetic testing, functional nutrition, and functional lab testing, we uncover what traditional approaches often overlook, so you can stop guessing, start healing, and finally feel like yourself again. No more one size fits all protocols, just real answers, deep rooted healing, and the clarity and confidence you deserve to feel incredible. It's time to shift the paradigm of women's health. Now, on to our show. Hello, Naz. Welcome to the show.
Hello, hello, hello. I'm so excited to be here.
Me too. I adore Naz. Naz and I have gotten very close over the last year, and I cannot wait to hear all the insights she's going to bring. She brings a really beautiful merge of so many different topics, but she is a licensed psychotherapist as well as shadow work coach and manifestation coach. And she's a whole host of wisdom. So I'm going to let you take the reins. Please introduce yourself, tell us what you do, and maybe how you got started in this work.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you, first of all, so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. As you said, I'm Naz Spurrier. I am a licensed psychotherapist. I have over 17 years of experience as a psychotherapist. I am also a shadow work and manifestation coach, with I think people are kind of like, they either know exactly what that is or they're like, what does that mean? Right. So
Yeah, oh, for
in
sure.
in essence, what I do is I help people break free of their patterns. I facilitate doing the deep inner work that's necessary to create a life that you actually desire. That's kind of like in a nutshell. Of course, there's a lot more to it than that. It's very nuanced. It's very personalized. Everyone is a different journey, but in the end, I help you clear the things that are holding you back so that you can have the life that you want.
And it's so funny, obviously knowing Nas, that like it sounds so simple, but like the work you do is also so deep and so profound. And so I'd love for you to kind of just dive into
Yeah.
the work you do. And maybe like the people that you see most often, maybe the things that are holding them back when they come to you.
Yeah, yeah. And it is funny how you say that because it does sound very simple. And I tell people it actually is simple. It's just not necessarily easy,
Mhm.
right? So it's not as complicated as people want to make it,
Mhm.
but it doesn't mean that you're gonna be excited about doing it. But it doesn't mean that it has to be hard either, right? I think there's misconceptions about doing the emotional work, the inner work, that it has to be like we're just crying all the time or we're just sitting in our misery, and it definitely does not have to look that way. But at the core of my work is really shadow work, which I talk about a lot. And what that means is really just bringing awareness to these patterns that have been running your life. We all have different patterns in our lives that have happened, based on childhood experiences, adult experiences, just different things that we've had going on in our lives. Unconsciously, we're kind of just like going through the motions and doing these things. What we don't realize is that a lot of times the ones that are not truly serving us in the highest, these are our shadow parts. And these are limiting beliefs, fears, maybe some wounding if you've had, some traumatic experiences, just different things that happened and were real at one point in your life, but are unconsciously dictating your reality today.
Mhm.
Right. So the shadow isn't bad. I know it can sound a little scary, like, ooh, dark, creepy shadow. Like, there are no bad parts of us. Like,
Mhm.
every part of us creates who we are as a whole, and the shadow is included in that. So it's not bad. It's just a part of you that really learned how to survive in certain situations and thinks that you still need it, where in reality, you may not. So you may have needed those skills or those beliefs or those fears, even in the past, to keep you safe. But in the present, it's not actually applicable, and it's actually holding you back from achieving the things that you want to achieve. So through this work, we're not getting rid of those shadow parts by any means. We're acknowledging them, we're recognizing them, and we're integrating them. We're meeting them with some kind of understanding so they're not controlling us anymore in the background. And it's much more of a conscious, intentional journey that you're taking. And that's what creates that real transformation.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that because I think people could be like, ooh, dark magic,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't want to do all that weird stuff. And it's like, no, this is actually probably some of the more powerful work that can be done. I know, thank you for also describing it because I know I first learned, I was like, what the hell is shadow
Yeah,
work?
like what does this mean, right?
What does this mean? But addressing those parts of you, right? Oh, it's so important. So I guess a good question, if somebody doesn't understand, maybe they're carrying these certain things around with them,
Right,
that's what's dictating their lives. What might bring some gentle awareness that that might be something worth addressing?
right. So I would always tell people, look at what's going on in your life right now. Is there something you're struggling with? Is there something like, have you noticed a pattern that like keeps happening? Do you keep picking the same type of partners? Do you keep running into issues with money where, like the minute you make money, all of a sudden you have to spend it again, or you can't hold on to it? Or are you, you feel like you can never lose weight, like you can't do that? Like if there's any of those things that are coming up in your life as like something that's like, oh, this just, every time, even though I try to do it differently, I
Mhm.
kind of end up in the same spot. We have to think about that this is a pattern that we need to look at. And there's most likely an unconscious shadow part that is sort of interfering, stepping in, running the show in these moments in a way of protection. It can feel like sabotage. It can feel like really negative, but our shadow just wants to protect us. And these parts
Yeah.
of us that step in, it's really about protection and it's about feeling safe. And so if we can acknowledge that, like, okay, so I keep picking these types of relationships. Why is that? Right. And so sometimes this is work that you can do on your own. Sometimes you need somebody like me to help you kind of like pick it apart. But it could be like, oh, actually, I have a fear of intimacy because of something that happened in my past, and so I'm purposely picking people who are emotionally unavailable so that I don't actually have to get there in my relationship, right? Like that's just like a very generic
Mhm.
example, but like we see people do this a lot, right? We see people do this with anything, with money, with body, with relationships, with your business, right? I mean, it can apply to pretty much anything.
Yes. Um, and I think that's hard because you don't want to always address that that is the reason.
Yes. I will say that there needs to be a level of responsibility and radical honesty that comes into play here, right? And not everybody's there, not everybody's ready to do that yet. And so their journey is to get to a place where they can take responsibility for some of the things that have been going on. But I think that like eventually most people we kind of, and I can say this from personal experience, that like you get to a place where you're tired of your own BS. Like you're kind of like, okay, I've had enough. Like I've done this enough times that I'm like, what the heck? Like, I don't want to do this anymore. And so you get to a kind of like a boiling point. And that's, typically when people are seeking out change, I like to encourage people to not get to that point and to,
Yeah.
wouldn't it be great if we like figured this out before you got to the part where you were just so sick of yourself that you can't even handle it anymore?
Yeah.
But, whatever, as long as you get there.
Yep. That every day with health. It's like, why did you have to completely crash and burn rather than, just pay attention to the warning signs for the last 10 years? But I get
Yeah,
it. It's
yeah.
everybody's journey and it's everybody's own story. And so I think speaking of, health journey, what are maybe some things that you see with people around? You mentioned body earlier.
Yeah,
Some things that are keeping them stuck, what they might think is keeping them stuck is things like discipline, their food, you know, their nutrition, whatever. They're not working out
right,
enough. And we
right,
know that it's always deeper than that. So I'd love for
right.
you to chat about that.
Yeah, I think when it comes to, and I think it's getting more mainstream, I guess, but I don't think that like there's enough conversations around like the power of our mind and how that affects our bodies, right? And so I think that like a lot of it is looking at, what is the story that I'm telling myself about my body? If my story is that I can't lose weight, or if I look at a cookie, I'm going to gain 5 pounds, or, fill in the blank with whatever, I'm sure you've heard a ton of it. And I'm sure like, people listening, you're like, oh gosh, I've said those things to myself. Cause I know that I have personally, I can say that like, I really for a very long time had a story of like, oh, it's just so hard for me to lose weight. I just don't have the metabolism of other people, whatever, like all these different stories. And so, what it actually is that I have this belief about what my body can do. And that belief is getting in the way of me being able to fully either commit to a program or see it through or even believe that it's going to work, right? And so when we don't have that buy-in and that belief from like a mindset point of view, that can really hold us back. I think the other piece that comes in is, I think that there are more women in particular. Of course, men can have this problem too, but I think that mostly it's women just based off of our culture and society. But more women have disordered eating than, and I think that a lot of it is very normalized of like, just growing up in, the 90s or the 80s and like diet culture was just so normal, right? And it's like you don't realize that like have a very distorted view of my relationship with food and and what that looks like. And so a lot of people bring that into their health journey, whether it's around food specifically, right? If there's emotional eating going on, if they're turning to food when they're not actually physically hungry, when they're using food as a way of coping, there's a million different ways that we use food in an emotional sense. But even beyond that, not necessarily even food, but just like being obsessed with their health and wellness journey. I've seen a lot of people who had a disordered eating past quote
Mm-hmm.
unquote healed that in a way where they're not necessarily fixated on food and calories in, calories out, like that kind of thing that we typically see when we're looking at like disordered eating. But now instead, they're obsessive about a different aspect of their health journey. And it's almost like they've transferred that disorder and projected it on that. And when you're doing that,
Mm-hmm.
not able to fully your body, find out what's actually helping you, what's not helping you, what really works, what doesn't. Like we have to be so attuned to our bodies and listening because everybody's different, right? And so it's like there's not a one, better than anybody. There's not a one size fits all or cookie cutter way to like get whatever result that you want. And so a lot of that is the client needing to be able to have that awareness and have that communication with their body to be able to be like, oh, you know what, this makes me feel better, this makes me feel worse, I have more energy, I don't. But when they've had this kind of distorted lens, disordered eating, or I don't even know if there's a word for it yet, but maybe I'm about to invent it of like disordered wellness or something, right? Like I don't know what exactly you would call that, but like
Yeah.
when you have that lens over it, it makes it very difficult for you to actually know what is helping you and what else you need in order to be at that optimal level of health that you desire.
I'm glad you mentioned this because I think obviously in the wellness industry, and I've been in this industry for 15 years too, it's like
Yeah.
you see these swings where people, we always think, oh, this disordered eating pattern or
Mm-hmm.
mindset around food. That's what a lot of social media kind of
Yes.
focuses on, right? But we don't focus on the fact that when we obsess about healing and being our optimal self and it becomes an obsession, that is unhealthy as well.
Right.
And, I have had to pull people a little bit down, like, hey, like, let's let off the reins. Actually, this is where you need to go. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
because that chokehold that you have on yourself, you always feel like you're never doing enough. Something's always going to break and you need to make it, super optimal. And I feel like we almost lose trust in our bodies when we swing
Yes.
that way too. And it's like both sides of the spectrum. We don't have full trust in our bodies, which won't allow full healing, right?
Right, exactly, exactly. And I think that, and I made a post about this a couple of weeks ago, but, I think it's really interesting because it's, this obsession is really a way to sort of fear when we get to it, right? Like when we're obsessed with like being healthy and again, I'm not saying don't try to be healthy, right? Like we're talking about extremes here. So I don't
Right.
want anyone to come at me and be like, oh, so I should just eat Doritos all day. No, no, no. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying like when we take it to a certain level where it's like you are just constantly thinking about this, what it really is that it's your safety. Like you are worried about your safety and there's this fear of being unsafe and it's coming out in this never ending fear of like, well, if I eat this thing, oh, I read this article that said that this is bad and now I have to completely cut this thing. And I mean, there's so much crap out there, right? Like there's so much misinformation, there's so much fear mongering, right? And this is like all this stuff that's going on is not helping anybody's cause, but it feeds it. But it's that thing of I think at the core when we have that will latch onto something and be like so gung-ho about it, like no flexibility, and just be so rigid and like we need to follow this, and if I just follow this and I do this thing then everything's going to be okay. It's really a distraction of from anxiety, fear, a lack of safety, fill in the blank there. So, and a lot of times people will jump from one thing to another, right? And it doesn't go away because no parts go away, but we're not actually addressing the core.
That's
Yeah.
literally, I mean, well, you and I have talked about this so much.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I shifted to more bioenergetic bioresonance work
Yeah.
was this because it was like we can do the protocols, find out labs and cool and like that's great and it will heal you to an extent, but unless you address the emotional roots at where a lot of this is coming from, which we
Yes.
can figure out and help move through, you
Yes.
know, your body will not fully heal. And what I love about it is it's also like your body's not broken. This is just how we
Yeah.
bring it more into energetic alignment versus I feel like sometimes when we do all these labs, people feel very validated, right? They swung from trying to do all the things, trying to control their body, nothing's working, feeling
Mm-hmm.
broken, right? And so then when we find out the root of the issue, and I say root in quotations because root isn't always gut dysbiosis and parasites, right? It's trauma, it's, doing
Yeah.
work, right? It's
Yeah.
like, then they're like, cool. Then they have this different identity of, well, I just had estrogen dominance and, SIBO.
Yeah.
And then it's this new identity where, but then it's like, then they feel like they're always going to go back to that. Same with like if
Yes.
somebody, I've had a client lose 80 pounds and it's very difficult because she always feels like I'm going to go back there. I'm like, you're never going to go back there. You are not the same person
Right.
as you
Right.
were. All of those things, like
Right.
just validate all of the things you've done, not just nutritionally, but
Yeah.
emotionally.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and so it's like
Yeah.
shifting that for people is very interesting, and to being like,
Yeah.
yes, you might have to be strict for a short period of time, right? You and I have both, we probably have different sides of the spectrum, but it's like there might be a period of time where we have to be a little bit more stricter and depending on their
Hmm.
past, meet them where
Yeah.
they're at. But then that's so you can have a lot more freedom in
Right.
your body and, but sometimes we have to pull it back a little bit and sometimes we have to let go too. And it's this very
Yeah.
fine. This is why I find coaching to be so helpful because a lot of times we don't know when we need to go a little bit more stricter, when we need to let
Hmm.
go. And when we start getting too strict, when that starts becoming disordered, for lack of better words.
Right. Right, right. And becomes detrimental to the whole process, right? There
Mhm.
are going to be some people who I think really need to do the emotional work first before they're
Yes.
even ready to do anything else. And that's
Yep.
not going to be everybody, right? Like everyone's different. But I do think there are going to be certain people that like they do really need to work on that mindset and emotional healing and do that inner work and allow that part that, wants to control and wants to really like, take over in those moments, to heal and integrate a little bit so that it can be a
Mhm.
little more relaxed when you start to bring in these protocols and you start to
Mhm.
do what they need to do to heal on a physical level.
I think this is actually interesting. So her and I were discussing a potential client, and we don't have to
Yeah.
mention the name.
No. Yeah.
And, this client was coming to us with having done health things before and seen some progress, wanting to go a level deeper, knowing that there's things, to still
Yeah.
address. And while chatting, she had disclosed very organically,
Yes.
some birth trauma and some
Yes.
things she was going through. And we were kind of connecting the dots. And she was like, what should I do first? Should I hire
Yeah.
you? Should I hire you? And, obviously, there's not an optimal world, but we said
Yeah.
both.
Both.
Like,
I think we said
because
it at the same time too. We looked at each other and we were like, both.
both. Because I think people think, oh, when I lose the weight, then I can hire the therapist. Or when I see a therapist, then I can start working on my health journey. And it doesn't have to be just weight. When I talk about health, it's so much more than that,
For
but it's
sure.
like, it doesn't have to be either or. So many people, wait, I can't do the thing until I feel good in my, and it's like, no, there's so much life in between. They both
Yes.
complement each other so
Yes.
much and
Yes.
expedite the process. You will be better at therapy when you feel better and you will get
Yes.
better at, and I say therapy, somatic or whatever it is,
Right.
you
Any
will
of the
also
inner
feel
work,
better.
emotional work. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. They really do complement each other. And I think that, like, I think that's where a lot of times there's a disconnect there. Like, I do think that, like, and I would say, and, correct me if I'm wrong, but I can say this from my personal experience. I think that, especially when it's coming to body, especially if it's weight loss in
Hmm.
particular, people tend to go towards the the physical aspects of it first because they want that relief. They think, right? Like they think the weight coming off is going to make me feel good.
Yeah.
Right. And so they force it. And I can say this from experience that like I did that for many, many years. I'm very open about the fact that I have had dealt with disordered eating pretty much my entire life. I dealt with emotional eating my entire life. I've healed all of that. Over the past, like, especially over the past 5 years, I've done a lot of work with that where I feel like I really like got to that point where I'm like, okay, I'm good. You know what I mean? And of course, it's always a journey, but like, I think I did a lot of work, the beginning of COVID, which sort of like when a lot of things came to a head for me, where I realized I was like, oh, I can't run away from this anymore. Like, I'm stuck at home now and I'm like alone with my thoughts and I have a lot of thoughts, like, so it was sort of like, and I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah, for sure.
It was that thing of like, oh, we really have to look at this now, like for real, like not just sort of the half-assed way we've been looking at it. So I practice what I preach, right? Like I can say that, but I think that I thought that, oh, if I lose the weight, I'm going to be happy. And I can tell you, I felt just as miserable
Mm-hmm.
at 130 pounds as I did at 200 pounds.
Yep.
In fact, I felt worse at 130 pounds because the way that I did it was so misaligned and so strict and so just like zero joy. And it was miserable. And that was the moment when I realized I was like, wait a minute, like there's something more here. Like this is not really about the weight. Like, of course I want to be healthy and I want to be strong and I want to, I'm a mom, I want to be there for my child, like, like all those things. But like I was like, the number on the scale is not the thing that's going to make me happy, and realizing that I was like, oh, there's so much more here that I have to look at. And so many of my clients have reported that same thing. They've done the thing, they've lost all the weight, and they're like, I'm still miserable. And I'm like, yeah, because it wasn't the weight. That, I mean, it's great that you're feeling healthier, that your body feels better. Those things are important, but that's not the end all be all of it. Like there's also this other piece here that we really have to look at.
Oh, 100%. I mean, obviously, we have so
Yes.
many clients we work with on
Yes.
it, and it's so hard when you're trying to goal set and, they want to rush the process and they're like, I'll be
Yeah.
happy when. And I'm like, let's go deeper because you
Yeah.
losing the weight isn't going to bring you the happiness, the fulfillment. Something else is going to come up too. And, I've said this many times, like, I am at my happiest, healthiest self when I am 20 pounds over my lowest weight. Like when people saw
Mm-hmm.
me, especially I was, obviously I was an extreme. I did a bodybuilding show and
Right.
I won that bodybuilding show. So my physique was very different.
Yeah.
That was my absolute unhealthiest mentally and emotionally and very physically. Obviously, people who
Sure.
know my story, my autoimmune issues started right after that,
Right.
but
Right.
it was like, if you would have told me I'd be happier at 20 pounds heavier.
Right.
Now, granted, I feel like I looked better too, but I was just like, that's my sweet spot because the sweet spot wasn't the weight. It's also, do I have flexibility in my life? Do I
Yes.
have flexibility with my friends to travel? Do I have mental flexibility? Because
Yes.
it's not just about metabolic flexibility, it's about that flexibility too.
Yeah.
And more people need to understand that.
Yeah. Yeah. So many people will limit what they do, and how they're living their life around food, and that's like that's not the point, you know what I mean? Like we're not supposed to be doing that, whether it's like not going out to eat with your friends because you're on a diet or whatever, or missing out on things, or feeling like you can't go to the pool because you don't want to put a bathing suit on because you don't feel good in your body, I mean, like, and I think that everyone can relate to moments like that, and I think that that's normal to a point of like having moments, like we all have moments, right? But like if that's how you're living your life, we have to look at like, what is this really about? Because if you have self-worth, if you have self-love, self-love means that you love every single part of yourself, even the
Mm-hmm.
ones you don't like very much.
Mm-hmm.
Because love is not about liking something, it's about acceptance, and to be able to fully accept yourself where you are, with the knowing that maybe you want to change something, maybe you have a goal for something in the future to be different, that's fine. But can you accept yourself where you are right now? And if you can, then you're going to feel good at whatever number the scale says. And you can
Yeah.
still want to change it, like that's the other thing. Like I don't love the very extreme body positivity of like you have to be happy at whatever size you are. I don't believe that. I don't buy into that at all. I think that like some people feel better in different sizes, and that's a personal choice of like what feels good for them. But I think that you can like yourself enough, you can accept yourself enough where you are, with the knowing that I'm also going to be making some changes and doing some things for myself to get to this other place that I want to
I am glad that got brought up.
be.
It's a really tricky topic, the self-love
Yeah,
movement is hard because I love when people love themselves and you can love where you're at and still want to change,
exactly.
and I think it's not again an either or, right? Because
Right.
that becomes toxic too.
Right.
I actually had a client who came to me and she was a self-love advocate on social media,
Hmm.
had a following about her side. She was so unhealthy. She was metabolically just a complete mess. She was always tired. Her acne was crazy. She had PCOS, undiagnosed,
Oh
you know,
my
on
gosh.
all of these things. When she came to me, it was hard because it was like we wanted to get her healthy. And then when we talked about possibly, I mean, she had a little bit more weight she was carrying and it was causing issues with joints and all these other things. Her A1C
Hmm.
was crazy. It's like,
Yeah.
I was talking to her, I was like, if we want to lose weight, it doesn't, it was an identity shift though, because she was like, but
Yeah.
this is how I've identified myself.
Yes.
And it's like we're identifying as just being a little bit of a healthy version of you, whatever that looks like, you know?
Right. Right.
Um, that
Yeah.
was a weird, that was a hard one.
Yeah. 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 Because I think there are misconceptions. Like I think that like, and I talk about this a lot with clients, and when we talk about love, I think that we have this idea that like it has to mean that we like every single aspect of it, because we use love and like just in our language, like I love pizza, I love whatever, right? And so like when you think about that, it's like, well, yeah, you love pizza because you like pizza, but like think about like your partner. Like I love my partner. Do I like every single thing about him? Like I'm sure there are things that annoy you about your partner. Like we all have things, but we accept it. You know what I mean? It's not like something that's going to be a deal breaker for me. It's just like, I don't love this about him or whatever. But like, or, even your kid, like you don't like every single thing that your kid does every single day, but it doesn't mean you love them any less because you accept them for who they are. And so that's what we want to do for ourselves as well. Like, accept the parts of us that may feel like they're sabotaging, may feel like they're overstepping, may feel like they're unconsciously running the show. We can love those parts and accept them, but also want to help them integrate with the rest of us in a way, with the rest other parts of ourselves. And I'm talking about like, it sounds like I'm talking about multiple people, but that's kind of how it plays out. But kind of integrate with the other parts of ourselves so that it's not blocking you, it's not getting in your way, and you're able to reach whatever goal that is that you want.
Self-love, right? Um, that's at the root of everybody. Whether you want to grow in business, whether you want to achieve a health goal, whether you want to, self-love is really one of the, okay, I'm laughing because I'm going to call myself out here. It's one of the biggest things when I, for anybody listening to this, all right, I'm going to be real relatable and raw with you, all right? When I was first going down this journey, knowing I needed to do something, I was so burnt out. Everything was crashing and burning. And I was like, I have to make a difference. I have to change. And this was also postpartum where your identity shifts. And, I knew I wanted to do something different. So I hired a mindset coach for the first time, like a true mindset, because I was like, listen, I've been trying to do this on my own. I think coaching, like I never shy away from investing, but at this point I was also invested in like there were like six business coaches. I had three coaches that went. I was like, okay.
Oh gosh.
Like I was one of those people, right? No wonder I'm
Yeah.
burnt out. But I was like, I really want to invest in a mindset coach, right? So I hired a mindset coach. And the first session, he was like, it was very funny. Well, the first session, he was like, I want you to go and meditate for an hour. I was like, an hour, sir, I will give you 5 minutes. I was like,
Right.
no, an hour. Like now I can meditate for an hour, no problem. But at the time, like that was not
Yeah.
normal. My body didn't feel that was safe. But he kept talking about self-love. And he was like, put your hands on your chest and tell yourself you love it. I was like, okay, like I get it, but I was also like, this is corny. I feel like it just felt like weird to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which is funny because now obviously it's a big it's a big thing we talk about. And like
Right. Yeah.
I'm like for anybody listening that might feel this way too, like I
Yeah.
felt uncomfortable, but I sat with it. Why do I feel this way? And I stuck with it and I did that work and I have been doing that work for, years now. And so it's just like, but it started with that one moment of making that decision, being uncomfortable, maybe questioning a little bit, like, this is gonna help me make more money in my business
Right.
and like be
Right.
happier. Like fine, I love myself. But I think also I thought I loved myself.
Right.
Like I thought I genuinely did. And I
Right.
didn't feel bad. I didn't have a lot of negative self-talk that I thought. And when he was pulling things out, it was very interesting how things were coming up on, ways that I talked bad about myself and I didn't know it. And that was
Right.
really what was holding me back from, healing certain things in my business, certain things with, just alignment and health, right?
Right. Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah.
I think what might be helpful is if somebody
Yeah.
is maybe in that space, maybe
Yeah.
to understand what self-love is, maybe wants to get a little better, wants to help their self-talk. What are some ways to bring awareness to this and help them move through it?
Yeah. So I like to think about, I think that there's a lot of ways that we can start to look at the way we talk it to ourselves, like you said. Like, what are some of the things I say to myself? Like, what are the ways that I think about myself? Would I talk about my friend that way? Would I talk about somebody else that way? Would I, and if the answer is no, then that's something that we need to look at, right? And really being able to also look at the things that this is one that people don't really like very much, but it's very powerful.
Ah,
The thing that annoys you the most about other people is the shadow in yourself that you're avoiding the most. So
ah.
think about that person who just gets on your last damn nerve. What is it that annoys you about them? That's the part of yourself you need to look at, right? Because we all have all parts in us. Like nobody is void of it. Like it's just like this is like the human experience. We have everything within all of us, right? We have the dark, we have the light, we have the, whatever, good, bad, whatever you want to call it. And so accepting that and recognizing that, like, okay, the reason that that is annoying me so much is because it's mirroring to me a part of myself that either I don't like, that I'm running away from, that I'm trying to avoid being, fill in the blank. And I think that's a really great place to start when you are, trying to kind of go inward and recognize like what are the things that could be holding me back on an unconscious level that I'm not aware of because it is showing up. It's just being projected sort of on other people.
Yeah,
I
that.
know that one's like it's kind of like it's a little crunchy for people. Not everybody loves it, right? It feels a little like, oh, I don't want to do that. It's like I know, but you have to.
Everybody's like, who's that person? What am I thinking? It's like gets your wheels turning
And
a
you
little
know
bit.
you have that person. Like everyone, like we all have that person that we're just like, and then and it's like, and for me, I've gotten to a point with it where I like almost laugh and I'm like, oh yeah, that's why I don't like them. And I'm just like, okay, fair enough, like whatever, and recognize that. But it's not always that you're being that way necessarily. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's a direct mirror of like you're not realizing how you're showing up in certain situations. Sometimes it's more of I know that that's not that's how I don't want to be,
Mhm.
right? Like I purposely don't want to be that type of person or to treat people that way or to talk that way or whatever. But in that fear of becoming that, you could be holding yourself back from like maybe taking the next step or being more seen or being more visible or speaking up or, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I that kind of leads me to a question. I'm going to try to figure out how to phrase it. But
Okay.
that's something I think when somebody comes in, they might be a little surprised that that's going to be a factor.
Yeah.
People can probably guess self-love might be a factor in, the healing,
Right.
right? Shadow, they might not understand what that means, but, facing parts you don't want. What's something that might surprise somebody when they come in that is a big game changer for clients in their journey?
I think a big thing is that honestly, like it doesn't have to be hard. Like
Yeah.
sometimes just bringing awareness to a part is enough for it to sort of, for lack of a better word, like calm down,
Hmm.
right? Sometimes, like, I like to think of the different parts of us as like people. Like, what do people want? Everybody just wants to be seen, heard, and understood. Like, that's what we all want, like, at the core, right? We want to feel seen, we want to feel heard, we want to be understood by other people. And that's what the parts of you want as well. And so, a lot of times, sometimes there's more to it. Sometimes there's a deeper process we have to go through.
Hmm.
If we're dealing with like really deep childhood wounds in particular, like that can, there's a lot there. But a
Yeah.
lot of times it's really just bringing awareness to that part of you that's popping up and being like, I see you, I hear you, I understand why this is coming up.
Hmm.
Thank you so much for being here.
Hmm.
But like, it's not necessary in this situation. Like, I've got this, thank you. You can go take a break kind of vibes, right? Instead of
Thank
like, damn it, my anxiety's back again. And it's like, I mean, well, now anxiety's like, yeah, I'm here and I'm not going anywhere because you're not paying attention to me. So I'm just going to keep poking you and keep poking and keep poking and until
louder.
you can't ignore me anymore. Right. And a lot of times I think people are surprised by that the minute we can like label it and recognize it and see it for what it is and have compassion for that part of us that wants to show up and try to keep us safe, it's like you feel this like relaxation and almost like the part just sort of like eases off. And it's like, okay, good. Like she saw me. She knows I'm here. I'm good. Like my job is done.
Yeah, I like that you said to think it
Yeah.
because I think one of the biggest issues is we meet it with shame,
Yeah.
and we get into this guilt cycle. And it's like
Right.
that's what is holding us back is trying to keep shoving it down. And it's like,
Right.
it kind of what's that thing? It was like like the whack-a-mole just like keeps
Yes.
popping up
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yep. And
shutting
the
it
next
down
one
and
keeps
just keeps
popping up.
popping up.
Yeah. Yeah. And and shame is a part.
Yep.
Part, right? And what are those parts doing? They're protecting you from the other part that you don't want to look at, right? And so it's very like it's like an onion, right? There's just layers and layers and layers, and it can sound like overwhelming and complicated. But what I love about this work, and I think almost all my clients can say this, that like it's so organic because this is the way the mind wants to work. The mind is really built for this idea of multiplicity, that we have multiple parts of ourselves that interact and show up in different ways depending on what's going on in their circumstances. And so it's very natural for the mind to go there. And so a lot of times in these sessions, when we are allowing for different parts to just kind of show up and say what they need to say and pop in and out, it's very organic. It's not this like overthinking, like you don't have to really like if you just let it happen, people are amazed by like how quickly they can allow it.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
people maybe a little walk away to kind of wrap this up is like, healing can be quicker than we think, less complicated than
Yeah.
we think, and healing can happen, if you just allow it to, and when you almost release a little bit of control, show the parts that, acknowledge parts that are coming up, and it's like,
Yeah.
healing's this beautiful thing because it's not
Yeah.
just like, obviously many of my listeners, it's like a body journey, but it's like, it's not just one thing. When you heal your mind, when you heal your body, everything else really falls into place. You know,
Yes,
suddenly
exactly.
grows, suddenly you're, whatever it is, you get healthier, you can have your, a baby, a better postpartum experience, you have better relationships, you call in the
Yeah.
person you want, the different people you want in your life. It's
Yeah.
just a beautiful thing, which is why I think the
Yeah.
work that you do is so powerful. So thank you
Thank you so
for
much.
being
Thank
on here.
you.
I appreciate you. Naz, please let us know where we can find you.
Yeah, so I am on Instagram. I am at goddess underscore unleashed underscore on Instagram. I'm on Facebook at Naz Spurrier. And I also have a free Facebook group that I will send the link to you for, Shannon. It is Goddess Unleashed. That is my Facebook group, and it's just a free community where I have free master classes, just a community for everybody to learn more about shadow work, manifestation, inner healing, all the good things.
I feel like I need to have you on and talk about all the manifestation stuff. That's
Oh
like a
yeah, that's a
whole
whole
nother
other conversation.
fun thing. Women
Yeah.
with many talents, and it's wonderful. So thank you so much for coming on the show. If you guys found this helpful, I would love to know it. If you want to leave a review, it helps other people, hear this conversations that probably need to. If you want to just send a private DM, Naz and I, I'm sure would love to hear from you as well. So thank you guys again for listening, and we'll catch you on the next show.